So good morning, CSL and beyond. Jeffon, you're there, man. How are you? Unmute yourself.
I jumped in right in the nick of time.
You did. I'm like 9:59. He's cutting it close, man. He's cutting it close. But I thought, whatever. I can riff. I'm good at riffing. How's your week going, man? Since I saw you last.
It's been really, really busy. There have been so many individuals, organizations that are really interested in having these deeper conversations, and that's where I was, up until a minute ago.
Yeah, it's something because I get a lot of phone calls asking for your information. So people are reaching out. So I hope this turns out to be a productive time for you. So I have to share a story before we get started. So last week we had that conversation. I had my big light bulb on two different labels that so the funniest thing, my daughter had some friends over. They all went out to dinner, and I think they had a couple drinks. They all came over, and they were feeling no pain. They were just kind of in a jovial mood. And I said, all right, you're 22 years old, all six of them. I said, okay, so when I say this word, I want to know how you respond. And 22, right? 22. And I just said, white supremacy. And they all went KKK, except one guy who said Colonel Sanders.
Colonel Sanders.
I don't know why he had this image that the guy on the bucket, the KFC guy was, some sort of white supremacist. I don't know where he got that. But so we had a long discussion about that. And then we had a discussion about racism. And it was interesting. I said, so where did you learn that? And they said, well, that's what they teach you in the history books. That's the books. So it's like our work is cut out for us to dismantle what the education system has put into all of their minds. Because I was thinking at 22, they'd have a different take. They'd maybe have a little more fluid, but they were more open to the conversation. They were like, okay, so tell us what you think. So we got our point across.
That's really, really fascinating to think. I was asking, I've asked a handful of people that question too. And I've got a variety of things, from a very deep conversation around the institutions or system, to KKK, to what's happening. It's just been a variety of different things. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and then to go to KFC.
And KFC, the first KFC was in Salt Lake City, where I was born. So I've been to that first KFC.
All right, so you have your list of questions today, right?
Yeah, you're right here. I had to find those. So
let's go to work, man.
Okay, so one of this is something that's been on my mind. And again, these conversations, this is like a fishbowl exercise where people can observe what you and I are having these discussions. So why do you feel, or do you think that it's difficult for some white folks? Why do you think it's so difficult for some white people to be called racist for their behaviors, and an unwillingness for them to actually observe the behaviors that may be seen as racist?
So
let me say this again, because sometimes my questions are run-on sentences.
So let's go to the first one first.
Okay.
Which was, why do some white people they're not receptive when you want to talk about race?
Or get very defensive and dismissive for behaviors that may be seen as racist in the viewpoint of other individuals.
Okay, so but to me, you have to separate those questions.
Okay.
Because when you try to attack it as one thing, you're going to get, when you try to answer that whole question, in my mind, you're not going to get where you want to go.
Okay.
So I think by having the conversation, first off, why do some people not want to talk about
racism?
White people, not some people, let's just call it white people. Because as soon as they're talking to someone of color, mostly, and I would say, and I'm just coming from my fishbowl, right? It's not a Hispanic person asking me that question. It's not an Asian person asking me that question. It's always coming from, and I can actually say, I don't think I've ever had a discussion about racism with an Asian or any other minority group. How's that? outside of a black person. And so I think if someone says, I don't think I have racist tendencies with black people, when you ask that question and then you follow it on with, and why aren't you willing to look at it? Then you're telling them their belief system is all wrong. And you're attacking their belief system, and you're not attacking, I don't want to say that, you're questioning their integrity and their belief system. Now, it needs to be questioned, but it's how you question it. Again, it goes back to how do we phrase things so that we can engage people and not, piss people off and have them walk away. So to me, that's two different questions, right? The question is, why do white people not want to have the conversation? Because in one sense, they're going, well, if I want to have the conversation, and I'm just fishbowling this for you too.
Yeah.
I'm going by what I hear people put in my ear. How's that?
Okay.
So I'm not representing the white culture, right?
Yeah.
No more than you're representing the black culture, right? Okay. So what happens, I think, people immediately go, it's going to be a black and white issue. And they go, but what about the browns and the other colors? And so immediately you're going, okay, we're taking just one issue on, one of them. So I think that's why this conflict with this Black Lives All Lives thing, they just can't, people just can't see where, I keep using that example. There's 10 houses on the street. One of them is on fire. Would you drive past it because it's just the one, or would you actually try to contribute because someone's on fire? It's like, you pitch in, you try to help. So that's been a really good analysis. Now, the second part of your question. So the first part of the question is, how do I ask that? The second part of it is good, and that's how we got into the racism thing. That's how we talked about implicit bias. Do you feel like in some way you have implicit bias? And then if they don't want to talk about it, then it's because their ego has to be right. There isn't any openness or receptivity. So you have to break down that wall of I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right. And I think, Jeffon, one of the ways that happens is that when you tell me that you have your own implicit bias with white people and all people of color, if you tell me that, then suddenly I have a commonality with you. You're not saying I am holier than thou. You're not up on a pedestal. You are actually speaking from a place of, well, I experience it too.
Right.
And I think that gains a lot of traction, especially like in my ministry. That's exactly how I approach things. It's like, you know what? I'm one of you. I'm struggling with these things, and I'm willing to put myself out there and share the way I believe so that it has some sort of an impact. And maybe you can see yourself in me. That's always been, maybe you can see yourself in me enough to go, I need to become open and receptive to an idea, because that's what Joe's looking at, trying to expand his idea in this place. Maybe I need to do that because I'm feeling similar to what Joe feels.
It's fascinating hearing that, because I know from my perspective, when I engage in conversations, I'm very much willing to find a common ground of understanding to then have a discussion. And I know that there are other people who are like, well, why do I need to wait to find this common ground? Why can't I just call it for what it is? And if individuals run and hide from this conversation, that's just helping to illuminate the point that I'm trying to get them to realize. And at times that constantly on the offense, trying to get people to bring something out of somebody who doesn't want to recognize it, or just hasn't realized that it's there. It's very difficult to walk together, so to say, towards a greater level of understanding and community cooperation and all of that stuff. So,
well, and I think that's the issue. You just hit the issue. Everything, whether it's about relationships, about money, about health, about this issue, about COVID, about HIV, about I don't care what you do, what you're talking about. The only way to communicate with human beings is not in a confrontation, because that's not going to move anybody. It's only going to create more confrontation. You have to find the commonality with it, and move from there. It's a gentler approach we scream because we're upset. We protest because we're upset. We do things because we need to create this change. But the change actually happens not when you're screaming at each other. The change happens when you go, okay, how do we do, like we're doing? How do you just sit down and talk about this? And how do you engage? We're averaging about 80 people a week just on the YouTube shots, right? That's
Mhm.
80 people a week that are tuning in that have started to shift the way they think. And because and keep in mind, people want an instant shift. You can't shift a culture overnight. I mean,
Yeah.
there again, I go back to the four agreements. Our book of belief, your book of belief was written ever since you were a little kid. So you have 30, 32, 32.
We'll leave that between us.
Okay. You have whatever many years you have. You have however many years you've had, if you've created that book of belief. You come up to somebody like me, 57, or someone who's 60 or 65, and they have a book of belief. And that book is entrenched, and it's been proven in their idea. And so when you approach that and you somehow want to challenge their book of belief, you better have something ready to go in a conversation that is going to gently move them into the place where you want them to go, or at least recognize where you want them to go, versus saying your whole book is screwed.
Right. Right. Which brings this second question. So we kind of touched upon that first, I guess, multi-level question there. So is it easier for an individual to run towards guilt, shame, or avoidance? Is it easier to embrace those things than it is to look at the facts of their behaviors?
I think you put way too much in it. I think there's only one thing that people run away from, and that's avoidance.
Avoidance.
Not because of guilt or shame. You can't
Okay.
guilt or shame me if I'm even avoiding the conversation.
Avoidance. Okay.
'Cause I just avoid it because that way I don't have to go into my belief system and analyze it. It's like,
Mhm.
nope, I'm okay with what I believe, and I have no shame or guilt around it. I'm not even looking. I can't even look at what that might look like.
And as we mentioned when we were sitting down on Sunday at the center, avoidance is actually the fuel that helps to fight, increase the flames of racism or oppression. Just the simple avoidance or ignoring that it is there does not mean that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And then so when you just look at it in terms of human behavior, let's strip it down to human behavior, period.
Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
And the rawest form of avoidance is if you have a child that does not, you're not listening to them, they don't just walk away. They start creating energy so that energy attracts your attention.
Right.
Right. So what happens in avoidance, any situation, that then the anger starts to build up, the frustration builds up, and then that energy is really high, and it's trying to pull my attention to what's happening. So when someone can't be heard, that's the frustration. When
Mhm.
someone cannot be heard, their volume goes up, right?
Right.
So it's in the human behavior to say it's the human condition that says if I can't be heard, I've got to find a way to be heard. I need to be heard, and I have to grab the pots and pans. I've got to do whatever it is I have to take to get that attention so that people can have this conversation. So in the adult world, it's like you see it. You'll see the protest, and you'll see, that way it's bringing their attention to something. And
Mhm.
it's the human behavior. So now the key is that going to get the attention of the people who need to have the conversation? Uh, um, is that a method that is effective in creating change?
And I always hang up on this word change. I think I may have mentioned it to you in a conversation in the past. Change versus transformation. I feel that transformation is what we're aiming for. Change is we could change the system today, so to say, and then let's in 2 weeks we could say, well, this isn't working out. Let's go back to the way it once was. So change is
Right.
is temporary.
Okay.
Except for, as I often say, man, I'm getting dark here. Except as I often say, in Palm Desert, the seasons don't really change. It's just like extremely hot and not as hot. But in other parts, you see that the seasons changing. Where transformation is this seed that blossoms into a tree, and you can't squeeze that
Okay.
tree back into that seed. It's irreversible.
Okay. So
Um,
So the vehicle for transformation then has to be approaching people at the place where they're at.
That's the only place we can find them, right?
And that's the only place, in my mind, if you don't do that, they're not listening. And you know what? I think people, even watching TV, I was watching the pundits go back and forth, and the talk show people go back and forth. And I think there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way, because look, there's extremists at every corner on every issue. And if people don't identify with the extreme, then they fall into a category that is unheard and underrepresented for their actions. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So, yeah. Gosh. Okay. Did I answer that question? I don't know if I answered that.
I think really these questions are more so just conversation pieces where we're not going to really come to the pinpoint of a specific answer, but I see a few people are chiming in here.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go for it. Here we go. What do we have?
See.
Part of it might be that also white people believe in the egalitarian fantasy of American exceptionalism and raised to believe that all men are created equal and that we are moving towards being colorblind. Black people know from early on what the history books is a lie, from slavery and Jim Crow. I can't see that word. Are whitewashed. Until recently, they have not been exposed or to believe the reality of what Black people live every day in this country. This might be why whites and blacks see our country differently. You know what? I agree. One thing I have noticed that I've been trying to keep my eye on are the conversations that Black people have with their families, and their experiences of raising their children and to stay safe and I mean, it blows my mind. It continues to blow my mind.
So I was just in Atlanta visiting my sister and my niece and nephew. My nephew is 9, my niece is 15. They're mixed race, so half Black, half white. And I was having a conversation with my niece, letting her know that never allow somebody to discount, dismiss, or overlook you because of the color of your skin. Be aware if people are speaking out against you in ways that make you feel less than. You do not have to agree with it. And I've had deep conversations with her in the past, and with my little nephew who's 9, sitting him down, and he's like, we were looking at baby pictures, and he's like, oh, that's before my skin turned darker, because he's darker than me. And I'm like, yeah, but Dre, I'm telling him how incredible he is, how beautiful he is, how powerful he is, and letting him know that none of that has to dictate the way that he sees himself. And when he's around people who may be pointing fingers or saying this or that, to always just rest on what is inside of himself, which is something that is extremely powerful, this seed of potential and possibility. And now I'm going to see them again because they're at my mom's just in Lake Havasu for the summer. And I'm going to have another police conversation with my niece, because she starts driving next year, and my nephew, 10 years old. I mean, he plays basketball in the street outside his house all the time. And just let him know the unfortunate conversations. But
so what do you think would change that? What transform? What do you think is going to have to transform in the short term, so that someone doesn't feel that? I mean, I know they talk about defunding or changing the police force and all that stuff, and I guess I haven't taken the time to dive deep enough into all the controversy around it, because I figured it's got to flush its way out before there's actually real opinions about the process.
right.
How would that change? What would require? What would make you feel safer? What would make you feel safer in talking with them? What does that feel like?
You know, Dr. Joe, I've never felt comfortable, even today when I see a police car. I don't know. My uncles pulled me to the side when I was young and just drilled in my mind to how to be respectful, how to respond to cops. Never look them in the eyes when you're, it almost, I think I may have mentioned this, like assume this like inferior position so you don't threaten them. And I was talking with my wife when we were driving, and she doesn't feel that way, but I feel that way for some reason. And my friend and I were talking about, well, what would have to happen? One thing for sure is police officers should have more training than a hairdresser. So you should have to have more hours of training than somebody who can, cut these curls. Um, Another thing perhaps is deep implicit bias training. It is not enough to check the box. That is what so many organizations and individuals do. They check this box of diversity and inclusion and say, well, I'm aware of it. But the true transformation has to happen within. It can't be done by somebody out here. Um, but we had a list of things that we think could work, but it has to be a complete revamp of the system, because even if the officers that are on patrol begin to embrace these changes, if the people up top or the justice system did not also change, then it's going to continuously be mass incarceration rates, people not getting the same sentences. Perhaps there needs to be stricter sentences for officers who do commit crimes, planting evidence on people, and not saying that if you pull your gun, you're immediately going to be arrested or put in prison. But it's like, there has to be some real consequences, just like you and I as civilians. There are some very real consequences if we do something that is outside of the confines of the laws of the land. So
I haven't been watching the news. I've been getting ready
me
for my
neither.
vacation. I literally have not been watching the news. So, but I all I heard was that one more a police officer killed someone else this week, and I haven't heard the details around it. And I don't know if it's a George Floyd thing or if it was a different thing. I didn't hear anything. Have you
It
heard
was in Atlanta, yeah. So pulled over. Well, he fell asleep at a Wendy's drive-through. The conversation with the officers were extremely friendly to begin with. And then, they got him out, did a sobriety test, and we're going to give him a breathalyzer. I think he tried to start running. The cop pulled his taser, went to tase him. Two cops were fighting him. He grabbed one of the cops' tasers. He may have tried to shoot the taser at one of the cops and then turn around and ran. And then in the running, he got shot in the back. And his lawyer, I just saw this thing where he said, if the officers say that a taser is a non-lethal weapon and he stole that from a police officer, does that justify using a lethal weapon? His car's there, you could, and so, and I'm just like, look, I don't take the taser, but it's also like, look, don't shoot to kill. But this is,
So how do I discuss that with someone?
you just,
So I know you're not like the authority on how to discuss things like everything, but when it comes up, how do you discuss with someone who says, wait a minute, the guy wasn't compliant, he did run, he grabbed the taser, he ran. What should have been done in that moment? I mean, shooting someone in the back is pretty severe. I can't imagine why they would do that.
yeah, I think it was like 5 shots or something too.
Yeah, that to me is extreme. But what would have been appropriate, because this guy actually did, pull a taser, and that's threatening to law enforcement. What if you don't have that in place? What has to happen for that system to be in place?
Yeah.
I don't get. I don't see the outrage on this one like I saw with the George Floyd thing. Because this one, so I'm watching. All I did is watch my social media feed, and I'm not getting that it's not hitting the news the way the other one did. And I wonder if it's because he did something that.
But as somebody just said, there's no justification for shooting somebody in the back.
Never.
I mean, he didn't have any weapons on him. He may have been intoxicated. If if everybody who ever fought a cop when they were intoxicated got shot, can you imagine how many of all different races? It's
Yeah,
like there's no justification for that, and that's really what I feel is the underlying issue is why does it have to continue to happen in that way? And I'm not saying grab a taser and do that. I'm not saying that that's the way to go about it. It's
right.
just there has to be another way. There has to be something different because he was not the first and he will not be the last black man who was without a lethal weapon running from a cop who was shot in the back.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. No one. I mean, there has to be a better way. I thought tasers were the better way. I thought when you tase someone, it didn't shoot them. It just stopped the situation cold. That's unbelievable. All right, we got lots of comments. We got to
Okay.
get back to this. All right, hold on. Where did we end up?
I see
Okay,
this one here. Black people have been wondering what on earth is required for white people to give attention. George Floyd's death finally got attention, so we can't make a jump paying attention and really look at what has been revealed. Yeah, it's for me, my great grandparents were born in slavery. That is not a long time ago.
Mm-mm.
And 8 minutes and 46 seconds seeing somebody being kneel with a knee on his neck, you can see when one cop gets killed, all cops rally behind that one cop. This has been another black man who died at the hands of police. You can see why there is this level of people rising up, even if it's protesting in ways that people don't see fit. When a cop gets killed or four cops get killed, you see an entire force come behind them and support them. So why can't black folks also have that same representation when they see somebody who looks like their uncle, looks like their father, looks like their brother, their cousin, their nephew get killed like that? You see this rising up. So no, we're not going to jump. This is going to be something that is very
Very present.
pertinent to this time. Yep.
Yeah. So there's two questions before someone asks a question. That's a really good follow for that. Hold on. First of all, when did you find CSL? That was in Atlanta with David, right?
It was in Atlanta with David Alt. There were a lot of churches in Georgia, and I looked at all these churches, and I'm like, there has to be a spiritual center. I didn't know, and I typed it in, and Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta popped up, and I walked in, and I was like, wow, this is all these books that I've been reading. There's a place that exists, and
Yeah.
then I haven't been the same since.
David was on yesterday, and he said you sat in the front row taking copious notes.
Yes, I did that. I have my notebooks here behind me.
Yes, indeed. Bless your heart. You guys are saying start every conversation with namaste. We are one. You know what? I've been feeling that in my heart when I'm having conversations with people. And also in this, it's kind of weird when you're wearing these masks, and you're in public and all you see are people's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see any facial expressions. I think to myself, okay, the God in me is looking at the God in you, man. No expression whatsoever, just eye to eye. It's kind of a thank you, Russ and D. Here we go.
Yes.
Jeffon, do you know of a diversity training, a class of some kind that our center could study as a way of getting on the same page, like anti-racism 101?
Well, I do a variety of trainings, but I would say I know we had a conversation around, a book club with white fragility or even anti-racism, or how to be anti-racist, which is another great book. I think that would be a really great conversation starter and be a very low barrier of entry for people to come in and genuinely engage in authentic conversations like you and I have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're on it already. Laura's already talking about putting it together. So, but with COVID, this whole COVID thing, we're trying to figure out how to. Today's interesting. Our survey ended yesterday to see how we're going to open, but with the numbers going up in Riverside County,
Yeah.
I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. There is no justification for the killing of Richard. Anyone? There's no. There has to be a better way. We have to find the better way.
And you saw, by the way, what's happening in San Bernardino, 2 possible hangings. There have been, I think, 3 or 4 people, black men who have been found hanging. One in Victorville, one in Palmdale, I think one in Houston yesterday. And they say some of them may be suicide. They haven't ruled totally that it's suicide or otherwise, but those are things that are very real right now that are happening as well.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How come I've not heard that? I haven't been on the news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Okay. So somebody said, show the video of the white guy who fought two officers, took their baton, then stole their patrol car and was not shot.
Yeah.
That is very true. And there are plenty of things
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've been I did see that at the beginning of all this. There were all these videos or body cams of people who aren't taken to that nth degree. Yeah. No, it's definitely it's out of hand. All right, hang on. The Rayshard Brooks killing was just heartbreaking. During the conversations with the police, he told them his daughter's birthday was the next day. I think he tried to get away from the police because he did not want to be in jail during his daughter's birthday. Oh, that's hard. It is heartbreaking. The whole
Yeah.
thing is heartbreaking.
Yep.
Everyone needs to be a better listener, realizing we do not have to identify egotistically with our ideas or opinions. We are only the observer. That's true. But keep in mind, people have a book of belief. And when you challenge that book of belief, you better be prepared to have a really in-depth conversation with someone who's looking at their paradigm that they've held on for so long. And if you want to change that, if you want to transform that, it takes a lot of hand holding and walking someone through processes where they can see themselves in the new picture, because that's the key, is to be able to see yourself in the new picture where you've changed something. And if I can't even visualize avoiding having the conversation, but once I have the conversation, can I see myself in the new picture of myself with a new belief about something? That's a big step. That's a really big step for some people to take. Realize we need to be a listener. Yeah, okay, we already did that one. In de-escalation training, which police were required to take at one point, just as school officials were allowed to enroll if someone tries to run away, let them. You can always get a hold of that. You can always hold them accountable later. You don't kill them. I totally agree. There has to be a better way.
His car is there. They have his ID. They have his name. Yeah.
It's kind of, how do we neutralize police underlying anger towards the Black community? Okay, yeah, let's approach that one.
Yeah.
That one runs deep. And I'll tell you what, I've got a personal friend who is, I think we discussed it. He's in the, he's a cop and he's in drug enforcement, and he is it's very hard to tap into seeing that. And yet on the other side, I see him extremely encouraging and out in the community doing really wonderful things with all people of all colors. But when it comes to de-escalating and trying to have a conversation about that, it's really challenging. And I think it's because what he does for a living. If someone is, if you're a doctor and you're telling me, I'm not, I guess I should use the doctor's phrase. If you're a cop and what you do is you are in a certain part of society working on a specific issue like drug enforcement or whatever it is, there is going to be an issue around what gangs and ethnic groups are you working with. It would be obvious, right? So how do you de-escalate? How do you talk to somebody like that and say, okay, but that's true. That's an easy way to talk about it. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's in a gang. Not everybody's in doing that stuff.
No.
So that's where you're immersed, but that's not the truth of who people are.
How do we neutralize police underlying anger towards the Black community?
Man, that's the gazillion-dollar question, isn't it?
I mean, think throughout all of history. I mean, we start here in America with people who were patrols for slave catchers that morphed into certain people who were then responsible for townships and keeping places segregated or keeping certain people out of this, that then started to reinforce through Jim Crow era type policing. And then we're only, 50 years removed from that? And so this whole underlying foundation that the police force has been built upon has been the persecution of many people who break laws, but there has been harsh punishments for people of color, and particularly in Black communities. So much so that planting evidence was probably at one time it's okay to do. Saying that somebody had a gun who didn't, no problem. We hear that even today. We thought he had a gun. It's somebody walking around with a cell phone, or
Yeah.
he had Philando Castillo had a registered gun permit and his gun in the car, and the officer asked him to give him that. He reached in to give him the piece of paper. The cop shot him in Minnesota. It's like it's a very deep underlying foundation that not all people, but a lot of people within the force, I don't know, it just needs to be a complete revamp.
So how do you do that? Where do you start? How do you keep safe and create? So we have to keep people safe and create, because there's still people that are doing, of any color, that are still doing things that they shouldn't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or breaking
Mm-hmm.
the laws. So you have to keep people safe while you recreate this. I wonder how this is going to happen. I wonder who's going to actually take the lead on this and say, okay, this is what has to happen, and get different cities around the world, around the country, to start implementing these changes. But what would that take? Well, God, Jeffon, what would that take? That would be
Massive.
Because if you just take personality tests and look at those and see where people's bias would be, it would be, I have no, I can't even speak of it, because it would just be such I can't even put my arms around how big that's going to be.
Yeah.
But we have to do something. So we circle back to, we have to do something. Was one of the police officers in the Gary, that's one of my singers, the George Floyd thing, wasn't he an African-American guy?
Yep.
And so what happened? How's the community look at someone like that and go, wait a minute, why didn't you speak up? Is that the cop code? I just can't.
Yeah, I mean, you want a paycheck, or you want to be for people, and at times I think that it's almost like a culture within the force itself, where and you can code switch there, and it's like, no, this is me. And I mean, it's not just saying that white cops are the only ones to kill Black folks. Black cops will do it too. Black cops will plant evidence on people too. It's a culture and the institutionalized judicial system that rewards individuals at times for locking up as many criminals as possible. And obviously that's not my area of expertise, but it seems that the issues run very deep.
Okay. So, all right, let's keep going. You have to eliminate always having the Black man be the dangerous criminal in police trainings. Police officers put pictures of Black males on the targets to practice shooting. People have gone to the range and seen pictures of their family members who may have been stopped for a traffic stop. I worked with the Federal Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms, and agents, let's keep moving, and agents talked about going through training where the Black male is always the criminal. Then you finish police training and you are placed in the Black community. You have to reprogram yourself that every Black person is not the criminal. Some officers don't make this leap. That's an interesting thing.
It is. That is.
Wow.
Somebody did mention that. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of those unconscious bias. It's you put a little kid and give them a white doll and a black doll and say which one is the bad doll. And there's been those studies where they'll, and hence, angel cake is white and devil cake is chocolate. It's
oh God.
And the book that I did mention is How to Be Anti-Racist to the Individual. I wanted to make sure that I'm accurate when I say that the police officers who killed George Floyd, that one of them was Black. I don't think that he was fully, he may have been mixed race, but it looks like he actually may have been, I may have misquoted. I know that there were 2 white officers, an Asian officer, and I don't know the ethnicity of the 4th officer.
Okay. Yeah, because someone said that and I thought, how's that going to be treated? will have to look that up. Someone just mentioned it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. More Black officers in Black communities, period. You know,
Okay, this is a thought. What if it's not just more Black officers in Black communities? What if it's more public funding in communities that are at disadvantage, at greater disadvantages? There is a huge difference from Palm Desert to San Bernardino. I mean, it's almost like you're in a different country. And I know property taxes and things that the city is able to use to help invest into those places.
yeah.
But here in America, it doesn't, if we are truly united, it would seem as if places with excess resources can assist those that may not have as much. Maybe that's a far-fetched idea.
There has to be a greater shift. I don't know any cities that have excess resources, but because the education system is based on property taxes, which is based on the sale of a home. So we have to look and say, okay, how are resources more equitably, like even at the federal level, how are they going to get involved in some sort of uniform policy around this? I don't think it's going to work on a state by state, county by county basis. I think the leadership has to take it from the top, because it has to be, if you're going to lead, you have to lead at the top level in order to make those change, to make those shifts.
Yeah.
Individual communities can make that change, but if San Bernardino, if Palm Desert makes a shift, but San Bernardino doesn't, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. We got a lot of these. You can think.
I see big steps are possible through defunding the police. It's a bigger concept than just giving police less money. Defunding programs include channeling money into community services, the safety net for these communities. Defunding also includes review and revision of existing police forces. Yeah, and that's the thing. Defunding police is not kick police to the curb and we'll figure it out ourselves. It's reallocating resources to preventative measures versus just solely strong arm and arresting.
You know what they did? They took another label. As soon as you grab that label, defunding, people think no more police.
Right.
They didn't. It's how people label stuff. It's the perception of labeling it.
Right.
I mean, if you would have called it something different, but the idea that defunding means if you lose funding,
you're done.
Away it goes. Mm-hmm. No one's going to support that. You can't have there would be complete lawlessness. You have to have some sort of a protection layer for people in terms of law enforcement, but they use the word defunding. It's like, oh my God, I want to be a wordsmith and go, you know, since everything's about communication, how do we responsibly communicate about things?
Right.
Where we can get people's minds open. Just saying that though, it's a trigger point. That word's a trigger. Mm-hmm. All right. You know what? Get to one of your questions. We'll come back to these. We've got it. None of these are real questions. I don't think they're comments, but not questions. So let's see. You had another question. I know you did.
I do. And first, I want to say to everybody who's watching and chiming in, your insights and conversation points and questions are so appreciated because it adds so much richness to our conversation. So thank you all for being willing to engage and share your perspectives and correct me or call me out when I say something that maybe isn't based in fact. It's looking in. Anyways, okay.
One question. Back to the other three before we go. Go ahead.
Okay. Why does it seem? This is another question. Why is it so common for people to say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or quick to compare their experience when they see somebody who's at a disadvantage? Or I hear that often, that I've went through this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You don't need any more handouts. You don't need to complain anymore. Just work harder.
Do you think that's a black-white issue?
I think that it's a superior, inferior issue. But I see it often from my white friends and family saying that to communities of color. Well, why don't they just work harder? I mean, they could go to college. They could get a good job. They don't have to stay there.
See, now as a parent, those are things that I say to my daughter and have said. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with anything other than, look, you have to do the work. I'm sure it may appear that someone's saying that specifically to someone of color, but I had that internal dialogue at home. I mean, I would have that with anyone. I mean, I have it with my white friends. I had that conversation. Not, I would say pull your bootstraps. I use different languaging. You know, in science of mind, we see opportunities creating causes and effects. So we talk about that in that realm. I don't always talk about, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make a change. I can see where that would be a perception, though, why you would think that. And
Yeah.
I don't use it that way. So I don't use it that, my context that I use that in, I don't ever say there should be a whole group of people. Just pull yourself by the bootstraps and make it happen. No, that to me, the one of the comments that just came in was about education. It's like everything starts in training and education. I think if we were to take the emphasis, in fact, I believe this to be true, when California became one of the first states to implement childcare, right, regulated childcare, and make it not only affordable but requirement for some people, some communities. It helped bolster that community in terms of education, and even it resulted in more kids completing college or high school, more kids succeeding through the pattern. It's still relatively new, but by just investing in that kids first program,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing them to have that experience before they entered into kindergarten, it really created a new layer of educated individuals in communities that were no longer that weren't receiving that assistance. So to me, that Kids First program in California was a beginning to start seeing how we could move the needle just a little bit, because to me that's where a lot of this equal access to quality education. Everyone has to have that.
Yeah.
I mean, we give teachers student loan forgiveness if they go into troubled schools, schools that are struggling with test scores, and in certain areas. It's like, why can't we create a system where that is more equal along all the paths? And we do make that effort, because to me, that transformation is going to happen long term when you do that. Long term, generations keep moving. All right, hang on. Oh my God, we got so many chatters here. Hold on.
So I see one that says it's the police mentality culture that needs to change within police departments on a national level.
Yeah, we agree.
We agree with that. Instead of defunding, put the money toward training police to deal with situations in humane ways. Don't shoot to kill.
Yeah. You're not hunting.
Right. Right.
Yes, to more funding toward underserved communities, including lots more funding for education for sure. Much more sensitivity, leader education starting in preschool. Yep. What are your feelings about reparations? Are you for it? Should be financial or investment in education, jobs, etc. Interesting.
I think the Japanese Americans were the last ethnic group that received, I don't remember the exact amount, I think $20,000 per person for what happened here in America. African Americans are the only ethnic group that did not receive any reparations for what they were burdened with throughout the course of history.
Would that create change?
Well, the one of the greatest assets that one can have is land. And I think that it would open the doorway. But as my mentor and I were talking, what would happen if suddenly we said, okay, we have it all resolved. You can go out and do anything you want. There's no more barriers. And I think that really comes back to an inherent self-identity as how you see yourself. And I want to touch on that before we finish our conversation a little bit more, but I want to make sure we touch on everybody's.
Metaphysically speaking, if someone, I remember taking a class on spiritual economics. I don't know which one it was, but it was talking about through the law of attraction that people who have money, if you distributed all the money to everyone in the world, right, that the people who currently have money and know how to manage money would eventually get all the money back. because they would have because the other people don't know how to manage and not manage manage their money, or they
Mhm.
haven't had the foundation, which is why we always talk about when you pray for something, you have to make sure that you have the foundation to sustain it, because you can get all of it, but if you don't know how to sustain it, you haven't
Right.
built the consciousness of it, then it will fly through your fingers and it will end up in the hands of those who know how to do that.
Know how to do it. Yep.
So I mean that would be, yeah, that's something that I think you have to look at. It's like, wait a minute, what would actually happen? Or should more money be put into resources in those communities? I mean, literally throw all that money. I can't imagine if the education system had an influx of huge funding in those underserved communities, what that could look like. Oh my God, that would be amazing. Yeah, and then all of that. All right, so keep going. Dr. Joe's point about the use of language and labeling is a big one. Yep. Okay. All folks are not starting from the same place. No, we're not. There's not the playing field is definitely not level.
Yeah.
This is not a level playing field at all. The bootstrap approach only works if the system is not rigged against you. It's completely inappropriate in a system where the game is rigged. I totally agree. With the parameters are the way they are, and understanding the parameters the way we do, this is not an equal system. It's not a
Mhm.
system that can serve all right from the get-go, right from early childhood all the way through. It's
Yeah.
not. Some people could take advantage of the opportunities. Some, a minority of people can take advantage of it, but the majority don't have the ability to do that.
Right.
What do you want to keep going on here? Oh my God.
We
Okay.
could touch on these last few, and then I have something I want to share just at the very end with regards to something that is really at the forefront of my mind that I think is
Okay, let's do
appropriate.
these last few then. Even large game animals that are being perceived as a threat aren't shot to be killed. Much of the time, they are shot with tranquilizers. The police are trained to shoot to kill their fellow men. It's yeah, I get it. You got to change the system. Years ago, the top 1% of the rich paid a 90% tax rate. That's what paid for hospitals, bridges, libraries, and infrastructure in all towns across the country. That was changed during the Reagan years. Now I pay a higher tax rate than the top 1%, but always remember the top 1% hold most of the wealth and power, but the other 99% holds the power in a vote. If the 99% demand things will demand things with their votes, it will happen. White, black, brown, yellow, green, we are all Americans, and voices need to be heard in our vote on local, state, and federal levels. Can't agree more.
Yeah.
That's one thing I keep hearing is that voter registration is at an all-time high. I'm glad to hear
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
In school, I was never taught Black history. I was horrified to recently learn Black women did not get to vote until 1965, while white women got to vote in 1920. Yeah, I
Yep.
totally agree.
Yep.
Reparations aren't the financial resources; it's an apology, acknowledgement of the harm that was done. Okay, I I I I, I get that, but I also like to put money where we can. I would apologize and also say, and because of that, I want to help fund this and create the culture to change it. Just change it.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right.
And thinking back with reparations, I mean, financial resource, there was actually a group of individuals who right after the Emancipation Proclamation received 40 acres, their 40 acres in South Carolina. I don't remember the exact president who passed away who put that in motion, but the new president then who came in was from the South, a staunch racist, and basically redrew that, took that back, and all those individuals who gained those 40 acres had to give it back to the people who they inherited it from. And that was the idea of 40 acres and a mule, where it kind of originated. Financial resources are important, but yes, without an acknowledgement of the harm that it was done, we'll probably continue to recreate the same system of oppression without true apology, acknowledgement, and then transformation of that. Um,
All right. Last question. You said you want to talk about one more
one
thing.
thing, one thing. So this is more so just a conversation that I want to have with you, and I know we touched upon it. There is something that I've been really embracing and sharing with my friends, of all races, my family, and that is this idea of, particularly for Black folks, my family, myself, to release this idea of victimization. I know for myself, I cannot move forward into my potential if I feel that I am a victim. Yes, I can look out into the environment, the external world, and recognize the playing field isn't even, that I don't have the same starting place as everybody else. I can get upset. I can be angry about that. I can work to try to shift that, but that does not dictate who I am or who I can be. If I allow myself to always be at the mercy of what they did or didn't do, I'm spinning my wheels in mud, so to say. And I love engaging with individuals, my family, my mentor, people who are African American, who have been able to succeed in spite of those inequities. When I look back at history, at Malcolm X, at Martin Luther King, even Mahatma Gandhi, at Marcus Garvey, at Madame C.J. Walker, at my mentor, Dr. Bill Guillory. All of these individuals were born at a disadvantage, quote unquote, in society. What all of these individuals, even if we talk about Crazy Horse or any of the great Native American chiefs, these individuals were able to push forward in spite of those inequities. And we talk about them because they recognize an inherent sense of empowerment, embrace this personal level of responsibility and accountability, were not a victim, though they were in an environment where they could be a victim, and push forward regardless. And I feel that if we as Black folks were able to do that, and all of us did so collectively, not waiting for people out there to change, we through our transformation of how we show up, we would shift everything, because you could not withhold the force of a Black community or all of us together stepping forward and recognizing our own inherent sense of empowerment. And that is something that I think sometimes gets lost, is a focus on releasing victimization. So this idea of zero victimization, it's not an uneven playing field. So what? It sucks. So what? There are Black people that are being killed by the police. There always have been Black people being killed by the police. We can work towards rearranging and transforming these systems. Yes, that is extremely important, but perhaps the most important place for us to start is what is happening in here, in our communities, with our friends, with our family, with our loved ones. And in doing so, we show up in the world differently. And when we show up in the world differently, we begin to shift the culture. And if they did that in San Bernardino, it would be a paradise. So I don't want us to dismiss that.
You can't dismiss it because it's the science of mind. You just define science of mind. What you think about and constantly reflect on continues to manifest in your life. So when the reflection is I'm a victim of something, no matter what it is, if I continue to reflect on it, that doesn't negate the fact that something happened. You can't negate that something happened. If I was in an abusive relationship and I wanted to get out, right, but I kept seeing myself as being an abused person, I will draw into my experience reasons for people to continue to abuse me. And it's not until I transcend that and transform that and find a sense of worthiness, then things will begin to change. But until then, I will, whatever seed of belief I have about myself will continue to, as long as I continue to feed it and water it and keep it up there, it's going to continue to go. It's going to continue to grow.
Right.
You just define the science of mind and saying, okay, look, I always say, so what, now what? Yeah, so what? It's done. I can't change that. Now what? Now what do we do? The whole point of having this conversation isn't to diminish it, saying, so what, but say, okay, this has happened. Now what can we do? What can we do to make a shift? What can we do to start making that happen so that so a person doesn't have to feel like they're victimized now? How do we empower that so that we shift that energy and say, create what it is that you want to create? You hit the nail right on the head. Yeah, no, you hit the nail right on the head. We should take that segment out and just like broadcast that segment.
That's what I share at my diversity and inclusion trainings. It's not about the Black folks or the Latinx folks pointing at what this white man in leadership is or isn't doing. Yes, we can recognize the lack of equality and equity, but we cannot dismiss or discount the empowered approach that we can show up with. And yes, financial reparations would be smartly guided to to facilitate transformation. But if we look back at Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they didn't have any financial reparations, and they were able to build a community that was extremely prosperous, so much so that the American government dropped a bomb on them in 1920s.
Okay, so here we go. Let's wrap this up because we're almost at the end of the hour. What can we do? Okay, so I hear that shift. How is that received by people of color when you say that?
It's uncomfortable for some, but we also begin to recognize that that is how any of the great Black leaders were able to become great Black leaders, was because of that sense of empowerment that they had. So you cannot dismiss that.
Right. Okay.
It's just simply, are you willing to actually embrace 100% responsibility and accountability for your experience? Or are you like, well, it's 50-50 because they have to do their part. And if they do their part, then I can bring my 50%. And if you're there, then you'll always be at the mercy of the external world. And it's something that I am always bringing up because it's easy for me to fall back, rest on my laurels, so to say, and resume that inferior position that I saw myself for quite some time.
God, we got to get that message out, Jeffon. We got to figure out how to get that message out there in bigger and better ways, because that's what I think. And likewise, we need to educate. We need to continue to educate. That's why I like these venues. I hope you continue doing this with us, because
yeah, I love it. I really enjoy it.
You know, we have I don't know how many people are listening, but they were pretty engaged. You were engaged today. People were like coming up with the comments. I loved it.
Yeah.
So powerful. Thanks for that message. Incredibly inspiring. Spread that message. My father taught me that other people's racism and sexism was not my business. Find my lane and work my lane. This is my business. He tore up my victim card. Witnessing the inherent good in each other is the way in. Yes, we can't change the past, but we can listen, absolutely, and we can witness, absolutely, and we can honor the good in all others. I think that is one of the key elements right now, is for us to listen, acknowledge, and say, okay, I want to support you on this journey. What do you need from me? To say, look, I'm ready to be there for you in that capacity. That's what I want to be. That's what I want to be.
Yes.
And listen. And actually, this listening thing is sort of, it's required. I mean, you and then to listen to your message, Jeffon. You got it, man. You got it. All right. So I'm out for 2 weeks. So you and Charles are going to play for a couple of weeks.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. All right.
Where are you headed?
We're going to Florida. Yeah, we're going to go to Florida. I want to go to the ocean and have a chair and an umbrella. And I don't want to have my cell phone. And I want to just sit with my umbrella sit under my umbrella in my chair and just look out at the water for however long I can look out at the water. That's what I want to do. Just turn it all off and just for a little bit. It's been kind of chaotic since mid-February. So
yeah.
Anyway, Jeffon, thank you so much, man. I love you. Thank you. You're the best.
Love you as well. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We got to figure out how to get that segment out. I'm going to talk to these guys about doing that. Okay. For those of you who are still online, continue to support our center. There's a donate button. We really appreciate that. We need to keep things continue moving through the summertime. Also, tomorrow is Friday or tomorrow is
Wednesday.
Sensational 6. I know it's Friday. Tomorrow's the Sensational 6. Join them at 10 o'clock. We've got programs every day at 10 o'clock. So join us. Thank you again for being here. Good night, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Jeffon.